at the Yuma Regional Medical Center in Yuma, Arizona. We are in a conference room that has a small landing strip for a conference table, and we're going to be talking to a special group here who have applied the process known as Baldrige to their business transformation. We also have with us Dr. Robert Trenschel, President and CEO of the Medical Center.
That's correct, yep.
And we have Deb Aders.
Yes.
Who is the CNO? What's CNO?
Chief Nursing Officer.
Chief Nurse? Okay, so you're the most important person in the group. I can tell that already.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
She does like to think so.
And
she is.
I can tell already. I can see who's in control here. There's no doubt about it. Who's in control.
What do you expect?
Exactly. And we have Woody Martin, who is the chairman of the board of the Yuma Regional Medical Center here. They've all been applying this approach here at the medical center for about 5 years. We talked in a different part of the podcast about what Baldrige is, but we're going to be talking to them exactly on how they applied it in their environment, which is, I think, really interesting, Wayne, because we're talking about a medical center here. This is not just a business where there's very low risk. Everything they do here has a high risk and a high return and reward.
Yes, and people come in with very high expectations.
Baldrige, and Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong in setting this up, but it is really a method for transforming a business.
It is. It's a framework.
It's a framework.
To work with him.
Okay, we're here because this is a group that's actually been applying this. Dr. Trenschel, what was your introduction to Baldrige, and why did you decide to utilize it here?
Sure, great question. So my introduction to Baldrige actually probably came about 7 years ago. I was interviewing for a job at a health system, and it was SSM in St. Louis, and I think they were the first or one of the first health systems to get
St. Louis is a good
award.
city for medical.
It is.
I went to college there.
Did you really?
At WashU, and there's hospitals all over that
Everywhere.
place. Must be a lot of sick people.
Let's hope they're getting better. So for a variety of reasons, I didn't go with that organization, but I was very impressed with the organization itself and the introduction to it. And I spent actually a significant amount of time with them, and I knew they were Baldrige, and I started researching about Baldrige and healthcare. And exactly as you said, Wayne, it provides a framework for not only transforming an organization, but making sure you have an enduring organization. And that's what I experienced there. And when I came here to Yuma, I was glad to see that Deb had already been probably 2 years into the journey here, and I said, well, let's try and accelerate that, because we want to do that here. And she politely reminded me that there is no acceleration, we'll go at this pace. So I said, okay, that's fine. So
See, we know who's in control.
That's right.
So the selection of taking this framework and applying it, that's something you were involved in initially, Deb?
Yes. When I first got here, to me, Baldrige is not just a framework, but it actually helps you take out complacency in an organization, because it's not okay to be okay. So what is that? How is it to be the best that you can be, to provide the care that we want to be? And so, but by looking at the Baldrige criteria, it touches every aspect of care from our employees to our patients.
How did you get introduced to it originally?
So previous organization, before I came here, actually was going through the Baldrige journey.
Okay.
So it was learning the criteria, and actually the biggest thing was actually finding out the huge gaps that we thought we were doing well that we really needed to improve on. So I felt that what a great tool to help us understand ourselves.
Great. And can you put a little context around what the gaps were that you were experiencing at the time?
So some of the gaps we see is, from a patient care perspective, we tend to be siloed a lot, and we don't talk to each other well. So we have leadership communication gaps. Some groups we think we communicate well, then when you get down to the frontline staff, they've never heard anything that you're talking about. So you have some definite gaps in why isn't communication working, because you thought you were doing it well. Listening to our patients, we think we listen to our patients, but taking into considerations from their side of the bed, because we're here giving care, but they're actually the ones that are scared and in that position. So listening to them is actually probably really hard to do. So we had some gaps there.
It's hard enough for most organizations. Wayne and I deal with a lot of different companies. It's hard enough for a lot of them to listen to their customers, and it's hard enough for them to communicate within those organizations. And I always say communication is the number one development thing for anybody in any situation. But it really comes down becomes important in this environment, doesn't it?
Yes, very.
Who wants to walk me a little bit through the journey?
Okay, so we started basically when I got here was, wanting to improve quality and patient safety, and brought up the framework that, with Baldrige. And then looking at reaching out, where can we use that's here, that's in Arizona? What is a good person to help us go down that journey? Which is where I found SWAE. So, getting into introductions.
SWAE is Southwest Alliance for Excellence.
Right.
And there are benefactors here today. They're the ones who set all this up, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So they were trying to find out how to start. It's great to say I want to get to the end goal. We always want the end goal first. But to me, it's all about the journey as well. We have to learn along this journey, because you miss things if you don't learn about yourself. So getting engaged with that, becoming an examiner myself, trying to figure out how does this work for us, because it's just not something we want to do because it's cool. Not that award would be really great, but it's what can we do because it's what we need to do.
If you're focused on the award, you're missing the point.
You are missing the entire point. Baldrige is not an award.
So tell me some of the steps in the journey that you've been through, and what have you learned, and what are some of the benefits?
Sure. So we've, the steps in the journey, obviously, we had gone through the projects or performance improvement activities with, I think, early elective delivery and hospital-acquired pressure ulcers early on. And then in 2015, we got the Level 1 award. 2016 was Level 2. 2017 was Level 3. Now we're applying for Level 4. So I think what we've learned along the way is really a variety of things. Because when you look at the framework and the structure of the different criteria for the Baldrige Award, it really provides the organization I'll call it a map for success, for sustainability and success. Communication, I think, is one of the areas that we found where is a big gap in the organization. But it's also allowed us to help us to put a fine point on our message. Why are we here? We're here and we exist because of our patients, and that's really the only reason we're here. If patients aren't an intrusion in our daily business, patients are our daily business. And so it's helped us in terms of refining the message that we give out to staff as well. I think the systemness approach, we are all part of something that is an entity, which is a healthcare organization providing healthcare for this community and the patients that walk through our doors. Healthcare tends to be siloed in its approach. I've done my job well, you need to do your job well.
You wouldn't have thought that, though.
No, you wouldn't, but it is very much. And that's because as we've all gone through our training in healthcare, whether it be a physician, nurse, or whatever, you learn that you're accountable for your own actions. But you don't necessarily learn that you're also accountable for the team's actions, and you're also accountable for how everybody performs, not just you. And that's a shift. That is not taught, or has not historically been taught in medical schools, has not historically, I don't believe, been taught in nursing schools. So as organizations go through this shift, you almost have to undo types and methods of learning that had gone on in the past that may have been successful then, but aren't going to portend success in the future, which is why we're doing this.
You have to unlearn what you've already learned.
Yeah, which is part of a learning organization, right?
Start all over again. Now, Woody, I know you had some thoughts on the benefits, yeah?
Yeah, I really, the rewards and all of that is fantastic, but my main mission, as the chairman on the board is really for the patient. And I want that patient to have the best quality, the best patient care that they can finally, get. And I feel very strongly through these, and it's not so much rewards, but it's so much training that we're going through. And it is a long process. I mean, it's probably going to end up being, 5 years or so to accomplish this goal. But
Did it take that long to see the benefits, or did you see benefits right away?
Personally, I think as far as the board is concerned, we've seen benefits right away, but we're always looking for the end game.
Right.
And at times maybe we get a little disappointed that it couldn't happen yesterday and it's going to happen tomorrow.
Sure.
But overall, bottom line again is what's best for the patient, and that's really what the board's really concerned on.
That's right.
And we feel that this is a strong area that's going to accomplish that.
Well, that's the right place to focus. I heard you mention levels. Can you walk me through the levels and what does it mean to be level 1? What does it mean to be level 2, et cetera? What are the differences?
So the different levels actually start at if you know the Baldrige criteria in the chapters, they actually have different depths down into them. So you kind of start with an overall. Level 1 is kind of like an overall. Do we overall have some of the general systems in place? And then once you get there, then it's now digging down and even deeper. Yes, we have a strategic plan. Next step might be, but does your strategic plan also now spread out through the organization and guide the services that you provide? And if it does, then you go to another level, which goes down even further as to what are all the details and how do they all start to connect back up to mission, vision, and values, to your patients, to your staff? How does everybody get involved in that? All the connections, all the pieces have to connect.
Now, when you describe it, so I'm just going to try and play the listener here. When you describe it, it sounds like those are things that organizations should be doing anyway. Are we saying they're not doing them, or are we saying that it's being done differently through Baldrige?
That's a great question, too, because, all healthcare should be, when you hear those words, you say, well, isn't that what everybody in healthcare does? And the answer is both yes and no, because yes, everybody wants to perform better in healthcare. Everybody wants to have great outcomes for their patients. Everybody wants a safe environment for those patients to be in. But very few organizations do it in a structured way that you can have reliable and reproducible results. Most organizations don't do it that way. They do it because, and they get the end result primarily because many people have made good catches along the way and haven't let, the bucket full of water spill over. But Baldrige, to me, again, provides that framework where you can have a structured approach to healthcare, but still have, in delivering care on a day-to-day basis, in whatever, it's not always about just providing direct patient care to a patient. It's about making sure that you've got the supply chain and the supplies are where they're needed, when they're needed, and it's the correct supply. It's making sure that EVS has the room clean, so when you're ready to transfer the patient from the ED up to the room's ready to accept the patient, so we can continue ED throughput. So while it's all about patient care, there's many non-patient facing activities that are equally as important for the organization.
You mentioned earlier about the learning and the unlearning. Can you talk a little bit about the cycles of learning and how that helps you through the Baldrige criteria?
Sure. So sure.
Who wants to talk?
So we've got, and I say this to new employees when they come into the organization all the time, we do things because that's the way we've done them, right? Somebody new comes into the organization and says, and they're learning their job, and I'll just take it down to a very granular level. They're learning their job, and somebody's training them in that job, and they're telling them how to do their job. And I said, that's great, you do your job that way, but you also need to be looking at how can I do that better? And you're going to have that fresh pair of eyes. You're going to have those fresh new eyes. You coming new into the organization, and this is 8 o'clock day one, they're getting this message from me. Your responsibility is to make sure that you look at that, and if there's a better way to do it, you need to bring that forward. And it's not me as the CEO or the executive team telling individuals, this is the way you're going to do it because this is the best way to do it. It's you telling us, this is how I need to do my job to be more efficient and to get a better outcome.
So it assumes they're the experts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a leadership role to do that. And I said, everybody's a leader in this organization. You, even if you're not supervising somebody, you're a leader of yourself. And so everybody's a leader here.
Is it hard for people to adjust to that mentality?
Yeah, I think so. So especially we're finding when we first started, if you have been in an organization a long time, and this is kind of like, you've kind of like I said, I talked about the complacency. This is what I do every day. This is how it gets done. Why are we changing it now? It was been good for 20 years. Why do we need to make a difference now? What is it that's different about this? How? Why? So sometimes you get a lot of, I think it's a lot of frustration, and I think there's also a lot of intimidation, or they're scared. They're scared of what that change is going to look like. How's it going to impact me? Does that mean I have to learn something brand new? What is that going to be like? So it's dealing, I think, sometimes with that fear factor when you do make that change, and bringing them in to be part of that change. I mean, that's the big piece. They need to help drive that change, because then it's not so fearful, because then they can see when you have a change in process or an outcome, I helped do that. Yes, you did help do that, and it's because of you that we were able to do that.
And it's also, it's at that level too, but if you take it a level up higher too, it can be intimidating for a supervisor to have their employees come to them and say, I want to do my work differently. Their supervisor may say, nah, this works, we're going to do it this way, we're not going to try anything new. And it's important that we don't have those leaders in the organization, or we train those leaders in the organization to say it's okay to question. We should be questioning everything all the time. And that's how we need to move forward. And if there's a better way to do it, let's do it. If there's not a better way to do it, that's great. We'll keep it like it is.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned complacency. Or is it because people haven't felt they've had the opportunity to really contribute, and so that part of them has been, that sense in them has been dulled somehow, and so they're just going about living to, working to live. And so now you're lifting that from them. And I was just talking to somebody about this recently, is that when they get put into that environment suddenly, and I'm assuming you maybe did this gradually, but I recently talked to somebody who went from one type of environment into this type of environment, and now they're expected to behave entirely differently. That's not easy. It's not easy to make that adjustment. Did you have any challenges with that?
I think that was one of the reasons why we wanted to take it slow. We wanted to be able to not have a culture shock type of thing. We wanted to bring them along with us. We wanted staff to be welcoming to the changes. They really are beginning to get more. The further along we got, the more interested we would get. The further it's like, so hey, I want to be able to change this process, and can we do something this way? And we share the criteria, and we share the framework. Well, what about this in my job role? How does this make it different? And how can I now play a role into this? So we've seen growth from staff, from directors who actually are embracing it now versus they just kind of stood back and watched to see what it was going to do. So I think by going slow and bringing everyone in and involvement, we're seeing a bigger wave of people wanting to move this way.
Okay, so if I came here and I went back in my time machine 5 years ago, how would the environment be different?
One area that I think really starts addressing really more the physicians is that we started with a residency program 5 years or so ago. And there's no secret in this area. Probably the typical physician has been in practice for 30 years, and 55, 65 is their age range. But when they get the new students and they're trying to teach them, and they say, yeah, but lately they've done this procedure this way, and it's been an eye-opening to a lot of our
So they're getting
older
questions
physicians.
from these people.
Challenge in a professional manner,
Yeah.
and it's kind of opened up, even the eyes of somebody who's been out of school for 30, 40 years, and although yes, they keep on top of things, but nothing like a new doctor coming through the residency program. So that's been an eye-opener, I think, for a number of our doctors that participate in that area.
Because the image of a doctor in an OR is somebody who is totally in control of the, OR or anywhere else where they're totally in control and everybody's just hopping to when they ask things. But you're saying this is a different environment than that.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's, I think it's an environment that fosters growth, fosters transparency, and fosters excellence. Because the only way you're going to truly achieve excellence or continue on that journey towards excellence is by adapting and changing to the environment, and by adapting and changing how you do things, because there may be better ways, and we just need to learn from that and grow.
That's good. So you've worked with Southwest Alliance for Excellence on this journey. How have they helped you along?
Oh, they've been wonderful. I could not have even begun at the very beginning to understand all the nuances and the pieces and the intricacies and how the connections worked without their help and without the guidance of learning. And I'm working with mentors who've done this for a while to help me actually understand how to move my organization. If we're going to move an organization, you want to do it the right way, and you want to do it with people who actually can help you understand it. And the more you get into it every year, it's like you learn something new all the time. It's like, wow, I didn't even realize how much that connects to this piece. It's growing all the time in these processes. So they've been a great help.
That's great. And you're an active member in SWAE. What does that mean to be active? What do you guys do with them?
So like I said, every year we try to, I do an examiner every year. I try to get other staff to actually become examiners. I've been able to get 3 other people from the organization to learn it.
So let's stop there and let's explain what an examiner is. Wayne, you're an examiner, aren't you?
I am.
Tell me what an examiner is.
So as Baldrige applications are submitted, there's an examiner team that goes through and reviews them at the different level. And to be examiner, we go through about 3 intensive days of training to learn the criteria and how the criteria is going to be applied in the different areas. The Baldrige criteria is dynamic, so it's updated every 2 years to stay pace with different changes. So as the examiner, you go through the courses, and then you're put on a team. First, you do an independent review of the application, and then there's very much of a consensus building process. And then I think the most exciting part is actually going out on a site visit to visit with these people, where you get to sit down and talk with some of these people and ask them questions that you have from reviewing the application, and really see the energy and the enthusiasm that they have as they respond to this process and the product that they've submitted.
Is there a cost to the organization to work with SWAE on these things?
Really, the only cost to me is just, time is not, which to me is very important, but that's not a cost in my mind. It's just what I need to do, because we reap a lot of benefits. We become a member, we join. That's a voluntary to join. And then basically it's just the cost when you submit applications, but whatever I can do, the more I can learn. And the networking is just very essential, the networking you make with these people. My very first examiner, I have someone that I connected with that we still email back and forth. So it's really nice and they're actually from a municipality. So it's really good to talk about the different processes and how they do it from their perspective versus how we do it.
How do you get your organization to commit to do this? Because this is obviously a big undertaking, and you're talking about changing the whole organization. How do I get buy-off?
Personally, I think it starts at our Quality of Service Committee, and those individuals, and I was put on the chair of it some years ago, and I'm saying, gee whiz, I know nothing about this process. So I go to individuals like Deb and say, what can we do better? What are some avenues that we can take? And we've had a number of chairmen in that position that start to, at least as far as the board role is concerned, we want to know more about this. What can we do to make this hospital, known wide throughout the Southwest, throughout the nation, as far as quality and safety of the patient? So that for the board, I think we actually started at the Quality of Service Committee.
But there's a level of investment that you have to think about in terms of the time, the energy, the training you're giving people. I assume there's been a few failures along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. To set that up and say, we're going to go through this journey, it's going to be painful. It's going to be hard. It's going to take a while. All right, are you up for that? Most people back up. So you got this through here. How'd you do that?
Well, I think, the board has to be involved, and the board has to, the board as the governing body for the organization has to have buy-in to that, and they have to set the tone. They have to set the tone for excellence, they have to set the tone for achievement, they have to set the tone for continuous quality improvement, and they have. And, I'm not just saying that because Woody's here, but they really have focused on governance.
Let's face it. There's $20 bills going across the table.
They're flying all around. And it kind of set that tone. So from my perspective, it really has to start at the board level, and you have to have executive staff buy-in too, because the board needs to set the direction, and they have, but the executive team also has to execute. We could fumble around and say, well, yeah, we did a little bit of this, we did a little bit of that, and it didn't really get anywhere. But I think we all, nobody wants to work in a mediocre organization. I mean, maybe some people do, but I certainly don't want to work in a mediocre organization. I don't think any of our team wants to work in a mediocre organization.
That's always been a goal of mine, actually. But see, for me, that's trying to get too mediocre.
I'm going to wake up and be a C today. So, and nobody wants that in healthcare. And so everybody wants to be part of excellence. Yeah. And if you want to be part of excellence, then we have to have a framework for getting there. And this is a framework for getting there. So it's not a hard sell. the hard piece comes in, as you said. It's, everybody, when you say that to people, they're like, yes, we want to do that, let's do that. But it's like, well, then we got to do this. Then, well, we have to do this. Then we have to set up this group to talk about this and do this. And you may have to do these things differently. And that's when you start to get the pushback. But that's when you have to be able to continue to say, this is why we're doing it. Not shoving it down people's throats, but to continue to get the buy-in. Because as we said earlier, you have to bring people along. It's not a light switch you can flip on and off. That would make it really easy, right? But it's not. It's more like it's just a slow ember burn, but it's sustainable.
I like that metaphor, the slow ember burn, but it's hot though, at the same time. I made a joke about having some failures along the way. Any that you want to share with us, and challenges that you had and how you got over them? Anything come to mind?
So I think we've lost some people along the way. I
Okay.
think that I see that as a failure if we can't change the people and have them understand excellence and why. So some people I think have left because it is a whole different new environment. It is a whole different way of thinking. I can't just come in, do this little piece of my job and go home, because now I'm expected to actually be more involved and to help us learn and help us change and help us improve, and how can we do it better. And so I think our failures, if I have not been able to figure out how to give them the why, so they can stay with this journey with us, has been some.
The why is very important.
The why is very important.
Building that awareness for people to make
Yeah.
change it's always something we talk about in depth in any change program. It sounds like this is a place where you can try something and but a lot of people talk about that. They say it's safe to fail, but then they create an environment, they actually do it, and then they say, well, now we're going to let people know that we don't really tolerate the failure. But
That's an excellent point, because I believe it is, and that's the tone we try and set. And my message to people directly is, it's not about assigning blame. It's about finding what the issue is and resolving the issue. It's not about who's at fault. It's not about who built it that way. It's not about any of that. It's just about, is there an issue that we need to address? If there is, let's address it and move forward and set the framework so we don't do that again. It's not about finger pointing. So because when it is, then everybody's afraid to bring up any idea, any area that we need to address, and that is the most dangerous thing, I believe, in healthcare. So it's not about, I've rewarded people actually for saying, hey, I appreciate you bringing that forward, thank you. Yeah, it was a mistake, but we just move on and go from there.
then people are worried about the risk. So again, we're talking to people about transformation all the time, and inevitably they see this risk with taking this kind of leap into this kind of environment where there's people making its distributed leadership approach, and they say, well, in our organization we have high-risk decisions being made all the time. We really can't afford to take that leap. But then I think about the type of organizations that are actually doing that, and here we're in a hospital, which is far and away probably one of the highest risk situations if you make a mistake. So how do you get past that mentally? How do you accept the risk?
Well, number one, you have to, because and I'll give you a great example. You could have a surgeon in the operating room and who's, by definition, the captain of the ship in the operating room. And you may have a surgical tech or a nurse say, Doc, are you sure that's what you wanted to do? Or are you sure that's the instrument you want? And, I've had physicians come to me and say, I'm glad they did that because it did set me on a different course. Or the physician may say, no, that is what I wanted. Don't you hear what I have to say? Aren't you listening to me? So you're right, there is a double edge to that sword, but we owe it to the patient that's sitting there on the table to have that double edge. And I tell staff as well, and we try and give them that message, that there will be some difficult conversations, and you may sometimes be the recipient of a difficult conversation where you tried to bring something forward and it either wasn't right or wasn't accepted, and in the heat of providing care, you may get yelled at. And if you do, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're in trouble, but it means you took the efforts that you needed to do what you thought needed for that particular patient, and to provide safe care for that particular patient. You can't have weak knees in that kind of environment. And to Deb's point earlier, we have lost some people in the process that it's a difficult position to be in. It is. It's not easy. But you owe it to the patient, you owe it to the organization, you owe it to the community.
For surgical, I always have to talk about the one surgeon, Dr. Vining. One of the things he's actually embraced so well, he's an OBGYN, he's embraced this.
Who's that again? What's his name?
Dr. Vining.
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 Okay.
He is an OBGYN. He has embraced Baldrige, he's embraced performance improvement. Everyone wants to be in his OR suites. It's just the way that he actually conducts he treats people in the room.
Yeah.
So they start out with saying, it's okay to speak up, and actually it's spoken, it's okay to speak up, I expect you to, please do. He goes, I can get in a zone, but I need you to help me. You are part of my team.
Was he naturally like that before, though? Or did he
I think he had some pieces, but I think the more that he got into it, the more he started to embrace it more, and the more he
Okay.
started to ask more.
Yeah.
How can I fix this, and how do I work on this? And, one of the big things I had when we had a new nurse actually go in there, which was, I've never had a physician after a procedure say, what went well, and what do we need to do better as a group? And ask my opinion and mean it. So it was a huge.
And that's great to hear. And the enlightened leadership here is inspiring to me. And I'm going to say that again in a little bit, but I have a question, because there is a debate that we have among our team, is that if somebody is used to being a command and control, egocentric leader, and that's maybe even the environment they came up in, and that's how they survived in that environment, can they change to be like Dr. Vining, or do you have to come in that way?
I think they could change. I think it's going back to why are you here? I always like to go back to when I talk to nurses, why did you become a nurse? Why, if I get resistance, why did you want to be here? This is not an easy job. It's never an easy job. Nursing was never meant to be an easy job. I said, you deal with life and death at every level. Why did you want to be here? So how can I make you get the joy back, and how can I make you really feel like you're appreciative and you can do the best care for the patients at their bedside? That's what this is about. So you'd be amazed at people who really, when they really feel that you mean what you're saying, they will embrace and jump on board to say, you really do mean that I can then take a risk because I'd like to try something different. Go for it. If it doesn't work, okay, we know what path that doesn't work, so let's try something else. So when they start to embrace that, and you can just see them they just kind of perk up and they just walk around, and it's just really, it's just wonderful to watch.
And once they're successful with it, then it starts to perpetuate itself?
It does, and you see that at the staff level, and that's important. When, as you talk about leaders and leadership styles and command and control versus distributed leadership, and, I like to liken it to a SEAL team. It's only 6 people, but they do a lot of work. And there are some people who just, I believe, find that a challenge, and they just don't like to do things differently. They may tell you they're going to do things differently, but then when they get out and they interact with staff, they may have a completely different approach, and they may not be delivering the message that you want delivered and providing the environment that we're talking about here that they need to have for them. And you may not always know that. So you have to a couple things. You have to be out there finding out, what people are experiencing, but it can't be in a triangulation type way. Like, I don't like my boss because they're making me do different work, so make a change. It can't be that. But, a role of leadership, too, is to make sure that the right people are there. But I think probably a more important role is to make sure that the wrong people are not there.
I think underlying that point is that you can't just say this is the way we do stuff now. As the people who are driving, you have to be out there and make sure that it is happening that way, and that you're educating people when they're going the wrong direction. That's hard, because that takes a skill in terms of confronting people and giving them feedback and so forth. Have you found that difficult?
Critical conversations are never easy. They're never easy. People, I think, I think naturally avoid confrontation. Although we have a hospital counsel now, and he just seems to like confrontation.
He creates it.
He creates it. How does he do that? But I think people naturally want things to work out well and not be confrontational. But I think you have to be, to make sure, and I see it as an obligation to the team, to make sure that the right people are there doing the right job at the right time, and they're not delivering the wrong message, and most importantly, they're not creating the wrong environment.
So people are going to listen to this podcast, and they're going to be interested in this journey, and their question is going to be, what's my first step to get started in this? So as an organization that's experienced in this and has continued to progress down the journey, what would you advise them that their first step in this is to get started?
I would say be sure you have a vision, and that would be my first step, and then work to achieve that vision.
You know, I think it'd be great to, I always feels great to contact somebody that's been through the experience and just ask them, because there's going to be ups and downs we've gone through ups and downs, you know, and that would be my suggestion. Talk to someone that's been down the road so you don't have to reinvent the whole wheel again. There's no need to reinvent the whole wheel when you can go to someone like Deb that's been down the road, or anyone. That would be my suggestion.
Deb's home phone number is,
Yeah, what is,
976-NURSE.
I think she changed it on me once.
are you willing to talk to other people who might hear this and say they want to go down the journey?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so contact MSS and if you're interested, we'll connect you. So, and did you want to say one more thing?
The only thing is, I always like to, don't forget the why. So if we are going to make changes and visions, there's always a why behind it. And I think people don't want to just do something for the sake of change. They want to know why and how they are. So that's a big piece as to why.
It takes a lot of guts. I'm very inspired by what you've done here, and that you've come in with this approach, that you've got the board support behind it. It's a very special organization in that. We had to sign off because we do have a 737 coming in for landing on the table here, and we're going to have to clear off, but it's good to have a very strong purpose, and there's no better purpose than the ones you guys serve. I want to thank you all for dedicating your lives to doing this and helping people, and doing it in the great city of Yuma, Arizona. And it's been a pleasure to be here. So I'll say goodbye, Dr. Robert Trenschel, thank you.
Thank you.
Woody Martin, thank you. And Deb Aders, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know, the 310 never made it to Yuma.
Let's leave this on. Leave it on. I want to hear this. The 310 never made it to Yuma?
The 310 never made it to
What
Yuma.
happened?
I don't know. They got hijacked at while they were going to go down there. But we made it here, and we think we're building something good.
So are you Russell Crowe?
I don't know who I am.
You got the Tony Stark beard down there, so I think you might be Iron Man, right? Which, by the way, red hair, we got Black Widow, we got the whole Marvel universe of this group. So, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.